called Subject to Change. How many of you were here last week? Bunch of you? Well, I encourage you, if you didn't get a chance to be here, to go back to our YouTube channel and watch, because Mark Walker, the founder of Walker's Furniture, was here and able to talk a little bit about his partnership with God. And it was so cool to watch and be a part of. And Mark's been a friend of mine. It was my neighbor growing up. And just to see him and his generosity, him and his wife Pam. And so I encourage you to go to our website and check it out. It was a great time. He talked about how our finances are subject to change. We've talked about how our regrets are subject to change. We talked about how addiction is subject to change. And Gary actually talked about how discouragement is subject to change. And this is going to kind of be part 2 of discouragement is subject to change. Take a little bit different angle, but I have kind of a subtitle, and this is really what I want you to think about today, is I would like you to walk away here encouraged to be an encourager. About 2 months into our journey of Northbridge, maybe 3 or 4 months, we had come from a great church, Mission Church over there on Pines, and fantastic people. We didn't leave because we were mad or sick of anything. We loved it. It was really hard to leave, but we knew it was time. And about 3 months in, they hadn't filled the position that I was doing. And you ever had just a bad day? So I was having one of those bad days, and I was just complaining. I was just not feeling it. And for a good hour or two, I had the conversation in my mind, and I said, I think I'm done. Right? I have super endurance in me. Like 2 months, I'm like, I think I'm done. Maybe I should just go back to Mission. That's the Mission Church. Maybe we should just go back to Mission. It was a little different. It was a little bit easier. We weren't trying to build something new. If you've ever started a business or started a family or anything like that, you know building something is difficult. And I was on one of those, pity party moments. And I remember walking out these back doors, and I was standing over there right by the sound booth area, because this building wasn't here. How about this building? How about the lobby, right? We got a floor now. So much fun in there. We got trim on the doors. We got doors. We got multiple people bathrooms now. We're like real. This is so cool. But I was walking out of the building, and it was just kind of outside, and my phone beeped, and I got a text, and it was a lengthy, nice text that just said how thankful they were for Northbridge, how thankful they were to be on the team. And in an instant, it was like, okay, I don't need to go back to Mission. We're doing okay. We're doing okay. The other day on our drive to school, I drive our kids to school in the morning, and we usually listen to music and sing songs really loud. And the kids are learning how to sing on key and sing in tune and stuff. And they were singing a song, and they both sounded really good. They always sound really good, beautiful, I know. But sometimes they're off keys, and they're my kids, and they sound beautiful. But they sounded great. And so I said, hey, guys, you sound really good singing that song. Do you know what instantly happened? They sang louder. They're like, oh, yeah, we sound good. We're going to sing a little bit louder, right? How many of you do that sometimes, right? It sounds better in the shower, so what do? Sing louder. Sing louder. It's amazing what a little bit of encouragement can do in our lives. My dad used to say to me, people already feel like a 1 or a 2. It's your job to make them feel like a 10. Maybe not even get them to a 10. Get them to a 6. Get them to an 8. Man, get them to a 5. Like, be an encourager. I was listening to a pastor this week, and he said this. He said, everyone you know or come in contact with is fighting a battle that you know nothing about. Everybody in this room is going through something that I know nothing about. Some of you I do know some things about, and some of you know some things about what other people are going through. But I'll tell you what, everybody in this room, including you, including me, is going through something that most people don't know anything about. And an encouraging word, an encouraging response can help that person. Paul says this in 1 Thessalonians chapter 5 and verse 11. So encourage each other and build each other up. Encourage one another. Build each other up. Hebrews chapter 10 and verse 24. Let us think of ways to motivate one another in acts of love and good works. And let us not neglect our meeting together, as some people do, but encourage one another, especially now that the day of his return is drawing near. Man, our world is discouraged. Our world is in angst. And if you think over these next few months before the election, we're going to get closer. But here's the deal. We can. Despite our differences, we can get closer. You have a neighbor that you disagree with. You have a coworker that you disagree with. Make it a goal to encourage somebody you disagree with. That'll rub you wrong. But encourage somebody. I can't tell you how much it means to me when y'all encourage me. Dalton just said something about Angie and I. Like that encourages me. But you can do that to your neighbor. You can do that to the person you're sitting next to. You know what? I like that hat you're wearing. You know what? I like that shirt you're wearing. My dad used to say to me, he collected, he had an old car. And so he would hang around with people who would spruce up these old cars and make them really nice. And we'd go to these shows, and it was a cool time in our life. It was a lot of fun. And I remember telling my dad after we left, I said, hey, that was a really cool car. And he said, why didn't you tell him? I'm like, well, because I'm 6. I'm not going to talk to an adult. Like why would I talk to him? And he says, that's why people do it. So you'll say something. Your motorcycles out there, super cool looking. I'll make sure I compliment on them, right? They're awesome, right? But if people say that about your bike, it's encouraging, right? It's not like, shut up. We are called to encourage people. And so my question is, how are we, Christians, believers, people who believe in Jesus, believe we have the power of the resurrection on the inside of us, how are we different than the rest of the world? Can you encourage people? Can you inspire people? Because our world needs me and you to encourage others. And so what's an encourager look like? I want to give you some characteristics of an encourager. First off, I think an encourager speaks encouragement. How easy is it to speak discouragement, disapproval, anger, frustration? Have you go to a restaurant and we're like, the service here sucks? When it's good, do you say, you did a good job? Now, I'm speaking to me, okay? So I don't do that every time either. Like, I don't know that I'm the greatest encourager. I think I'm decent and getting better at it. But as I'm prepping these last couple weeks for this message, I'm like, man, I think I need to encourage people more, especially when I'm frustrated. How many of you encourage the driver next door, right? Roll down your window. You're driving good. You all laugh like you've never done that. Neither have I, so. I think we can all get in this thing of, well, I'm not thinking negative thoughts about them. And I know, they know that they're a good dad. Or they know that they're a good athlete. They know that they're a good, you fill in the blank. It'd be weird and awkward if I said something to them. Look at Proverbs. I've got 5 scriptures in Proverbs here. Proverbs chapter 10 and verse 11. The words of the godly are life-giving fountain. 10:21 says, the words of the godly encourage many. Death and life, 18:21, are in the power of the tongue. If death is in the power of the tongue, so is life. You know what you can do to your kids this week? I don't care how old they are. I don't care how young they are. That's the perfect time and the perfect age. Whatever age they are, that's the perfect age for you to say something positive about your family. Death and life are in the power of your words. Proverbs 25:11. This is so true. The right word at the right time is like precious gold set in silver. I'm a jewelry guy. It's weird, I know. But I used to sell jewelry for like 15 years on and off. I was a jewelry salesman. So I love to look at diamonds, and I love diamond rings. Angie will be like, hey, this person got engaged. I'm like, did you see the ring? She's like, no, I didn't see the ring. I don't care. I'm like, I do. I want to know how big it is and what's set in. Is it bezel? Is it this? Is it baguette? Anyways, I'll go off on the jewelry side of stuff. But that just paints a great picture for me. You see a beautiful diamond ring, a beautiful gold ring set in silver with cool designs. Like the right word at the right time is like giving that to somebody. It's more precious. It's more meaningful. Proverbs 16:24. Pleasant words are a honeycomb, sweet to the soul and healing to the bones. In your families, it's easy to point out the negative. In your close working relationships, it's easy to point out the negatives. And I'm not saying there's not a time for critique. I'm not saying don't ever critique, don't ever say a negative word. I'm not saying that. I am saying, can we be known as an encourager, or are we going to be known as Debbie Downer? Sorry, Debbie. It's just what it fits. We love Debbie. I'm trying to think of a positive word here. Debbie is the most amazing encourager in the world. You are not that. I apologize. Are you somebody who's always like, well, I don't know that we can do this. I don't know that is what you, I'm just challenging you. If you think something good in somebody's life today or this week, say it. Speak it. Because your words have the power of life and death. And everybody needs it. Everybody. I don't care how old you are, how young you are, how successful you are, or how unsuccessful you are. Abraham Lincoln, when he was assassinated, they went through all of his personal belongings, and in his pocket, they found a crinkled up newspaper posting in his pocket that read this way: Abraham Lincoln is one of the greatest statesmen of our time. He kept a positive newspaper clipping in his pocket because every once in a while, even Abraham Lincoln needed encouragement. And how many know a president does not get much encouragement? And sometimes negative rings louder than positive. So be aware. When you say something negative, my encouragement is to say a couple things positive. They call that the sandwich method. Okay? The bread is positive, the meat is negative. So next time you have to deal some negative news to somebody, give them a positive, the negative, and a positive. So next time I talk to you and I'm starting to be positive, just wait for the meat. Just joking. Just joking. Just joking. But isn't that true? I want to hear you're really good at this and you're really good at this. You could work on this, but you're really good at this. This that I need to work on is more pleasing to me, and I'm more apt to do it when I know, oh, I'm still good at this and this. You can be an encourager. I want to ask a question to all you sports fans. Who is the leading scorer that has ever been on an NFL field? Does anybody know who is the leading scorer in the NFL? Like that's ever, he's retired now, but I think any NFL. Okay, how about this? Does anybody, Uncle Steve, my brother-in-law. Adam Vinatieri. Just give Uncle Steve a big round of applause. Other than Steve, how many of you know that name? Oh gosh. Okay, great. Okay. What position was he? He's a kicker, right? Most of the time we remember the quarterback, Tom Brady. We remember the most publicized positions. The kicker is not the most paid, although most of the time they are the highest scorers. The interesting thing for me and for you is that little things are a really big deal. The little things. Oh, that's not a big deal if I say that or not. Maybe not, but add it up over time, and over time, the little things are a big deal. About 12 or 15 years ago, I think Angie and I, along with Barbie, ran a marathon. And if you've ever ran a marathon, 26.2 miles, I don't know why it's 0.2, like that seems ridiculous to me, but 26.2 miles, I think it's because it's kilometers. But here's the point, is when we're running a marathon, people who don't even know me were cheering me on. Great job, good job. And man, that does something for you. That does something for me when it's like, you're not doing very good, and you're just you're at mile 20, and it's like, I don't want to finish this, I don't want to keep going. And everybody's like, good job, you're doing great, you're looking good. It encourages me, okay, I can do this. It makes Bodie and Lexi, my kids, sing a little bit louder. During worship, one of the things I say oftentimes, and I mean this when I worship, is you sound good today. And you do. And when you do, and when I say that, oftentimes it gets louder in the room because encouragement helps people be more confident. So an encourager speaks their encouragement. In the first church in the book of Acts, there's a guy that they basically named him Mr. Encouragement. This is the first time we see him, Acts chapter 4 and verse 36. For instance, There was Joseph. So they're talking about how the disciples and the people in the first church came together and they like gave each other stuff, and it was such a cool community. And then they give a for instance. There was Joseph, the one the apostles nicknamed Barnabas, which means son of encouragement. He was from the tribe of Levi that came from the island of Cyprus. He sold a field he owned and brought the money to the apostles. A lot of other people sold their property to bring the money to the apostles, but this was the only one that they mentioned by name. Barnabas was an encourager. That was what he was known by. Everybody knew him as an encourager. You can go online and you can find out a lot more about Barnabas. He's got a lot more opportunities, but he is one of the founding fathers of Christianity and the church today, and he was an encourager. My family often makes fun of me because I love basketball, but I'm not the greatest basketball player on the planet. I know that's surprising for most of you. But I am a good encourager. And so when I won an award in school, it was not greatest defensive player or rebounder or scorer. It was most inspirational. And kind of my claim to fame. I could tell you where the trophy is, honestly, because I like it that much. I'm just a male cheerleader, basically. But I'm okay with that. Barnabas knew his role. And this may not be your gifting, and I'm not saying you have to go overboard and become Mr. Inspirational, or hopefully you win that award or become a cheerleader. I'm not saying that. But I am saying I think every one of us in this room can encourage somebody a little bit more. An encourager speaks encouragement, but Barnabas even went a little bit further in this. An encourager also will sacrifice. Will put their needs below the needs of other people. I'm preaching this message about being an encourager, and for about 2 weeks I've wanted to send a text to somebody not in this room, and I've wanted to send a text to them, and for some reason I just didn't. Now, why in the world is sometimes it hard to encourage somebody? Probably the same reason it's hard to say I'm sorry. Because you got to suck up some pride, and I don't know what it is, but here's my guess. I think it's the enemy whispering. If you have the opportunity to encourage somebody, he's trying to get you to think it's embarrassing. They don't need to hear it. It's unimportant. It's not a big deal. They hear it all the time. You fill in the blank, whatever the enemy's going to whisper to you, but oftentimes it's a little bit scary, and it's a sacrifice for us to encourage other people. I'm saying rise above it, speak to the mountain of the enemy, and say, you're a loser, that's okay. I don't care if they need it or they don't need it. I feel this, that must be from God, so I'm going to encourage them. I'm going to say something sweet to them. I'm going to say something nice to them. I'm going to encourage that person. It's not always easy, because I believe encouragement starts with sacrifice. And that's what Barnabas does. He sells his land. That wasn't always easy, but that's what Barnabas does. So an encourager speaks encouragement. They will sacrifice. And here's a good one. An encourager sees potential. Doesn't see necessarily the facts, but they see potential. There's a great encounter with Barnabas and Paul. At this time, his name is Saul. Is before he comes and meets Jesus. Now, Saul's profession before he was a preacher was a murderer. He was trying to snuff out Jesus and the people of the way, which were Christians. He was trying to snuff them out in the name of God. He was like, they're out of line, they're wrong, I'm going to go out and kill them all. And he did that. So naturally, Christians were a little skeptical when the murderer comes and says, I found Jesus. They were like, maybe you should prove it. Let's let you live for a couple years a little bit. Let's let you prove it out a little bit. But Barnabas, he'd already proven himself. He sacrificed. He encouraged. They knew Barnabas. So in Acts chapter 9, when Paul comes on the scene, this is when his name is changed, so he's Paul. Paul comes on the scene and tries to introduce himself to the other believers. He meets some resistance. Chapter 20 or 9, verse 26. When Saul arrives in Jerusalem, he tried to meet with the believers, but they were all afraid of him. they did not believe that he had truly become a believer. Then Barnabas brought him to the apostles and told them how Saul had seen the Lord on the way to Damascus and how the Lord had spoken to Saul. He also told them that Saul had preached boldly the name of Jesus in Damascus. Without Barnabas, Paul would have not been accepted, would not been have brought in, and would not have the opportunity to start the church and radically change what we're doing today the way that he did. Paul needed Barnabas. And then they go on a bunch of different journeys together. And Paul was a huge part of it, but Barnabas was the one that started it. Barnabas is the one that said, this guy's got cred. He's got street cred. He's good. He's probably a better preacher than me. He's going to do more than me. But he encouraged everybody, hey, let's accept him. Because Barnabas was an encourager. And he didn't just see Paul the way it was, like everybody else. He saw him for what he could be. The people in your life, do you see them for what they could be? Or do you see them for the way they are or what they used to be? It's easy for me to point and judge and question. And I'm not saying you don't operate in wisdom. I'm not saying you don't protect those that you love. But I am saying, let's ask God about somebody's potential and believe the best in people. When we started this church, Gary Hebden believed in us, gave us this property in that old building that is now beautiful and new, and this new space that we were able to build on. He saw something in Angie and I that no one had seen yet. Nobody would have just given us property. Nobody would have just blessed us like he did, but he saw potential in us. Many of you who started with us at the very beginning, almost 4 years ago. Hey, September, it's 4 years. This is our 4th summer being in existence. And the amazing thing about y'all who came on early on, or a couple months after, or even a year after, is you believed in it. Right now, you're believing in Northbridge before it is what it's going to be someday. You're seeing potential. Our recovery ministry sees potential every Thursday night in people, every Sunday morning. We're a church that sees potential. And I want us to carry that into our lives. Do you see your neighbor's potential? Do you see your coworkers' potential? When I was a young kid, at my first real job, my first jewelry job actually, my manager's name was Linda Coiner. Great lady. She saw potential in me. I remember I said, hey, could I work in jewelry, not knowing what it was? And she's like, I was just kind of a sniveling brat kid, you know. Carl and Karen know that, and all that. So I was a little. What did you say? And so, you know, but she believed in me, gave me a job, and then I was very successful in selling jewelry, and it helped provide for our family for a lot of years. But she saw something in me. She saw potential. She didn't just judge me based off of where I was, but she saw potential. I have many people here that have seen potential in me. My wife, her parents, Barb and Gary, saw potential in us. Who do you see potential in? Who do you see beyond what is actually happening right now? Because that's what Barnabas did for Paul, and it changed the world. An encourager also runs to the wounded. Runs to the wounded. There's a great story about the famous Jim Bakker, who was a televangelist and ran around on his wife and cheated people out of money and embezzled and did a lot of really, really bad things. He went to jail, prison, for a number of years. And one day he found himself in the prison. Cleaning toilets was one of his jobs, with very little to his name. Like, he had 2 sets of clothes, a good one for visiting days, and then the old ratty ones that he used for cleaning toilets and working. And most of the time he was in his ratty ones because not a lot of people visited him. His family came rarely and scarcely. A few of his friends came very rarely and scarcely. But one day, he had pneumonia, and it was at the lowest moment he considered committing suicide somehow in prison because his life had gone such awry. He had been at the very bottom of his life, literally cleaning toilets in worn out holy shoes, and he was a wreck. On top of that, he was sick. And he said, God, I just wish you'd take me. I deserve it. I stole. I did everything I preached against. I'm a miserable wreck. The warden came in and said, there's a visitor here for you today. And he said, it's not visiting hours, and I haven't had a visitor in so long, it's not visiting day. And he said, well, the warden made an exception. Why don't you come on? He said, I'm not dressed. He said, it's now or never. Come on. He says, I went to the thing, head down, embarrassed, looks up, and he sees Billy Graham walk in the room. And Jim Baker says, man, Billy, they were friends at one time. You don't have to be here. I'm a mess. I'm worthless. I've messed up. I'm a cheater. I'm a stealer. I'm a liar. Billy said, I don't care. Come and hug me. I just want you to know that God loves you. And I love you. And Billy Graham would visit him multiple times a year because Billy Graham was an encourager. And he ran toward the wounded, those that feel less than. There's somebody in your world and in our world that needs an encourager in their life. Can you be that encourager? Can you run to the wounded and not run away from those who are scary? Not run away from those who it doesn't make a lot of sense in their life. Jesus did this. He was completely contrary to the system. He hung out with the woman at the well, who was a divorced woman, who was living with her partner, and yet he chose to be her to be an instrumental one in proclaiming the gospel to Samaria. He chose her. He chose a woman caught in the act of adultery to love, forgive, and accept. He chose a bunch of messed up people to be his disciples. A tax collector who everybody hated. Peter, who was just a wreck. He chose imperfect people to carry out the gospel. And that's good news for me and you, because Jesus ran toward the wounded, me and you, and he ran towards us, and he chose us to carry out the mission of God. Jesus is the ultimate encourager. And we can do the same for somebody else. I want to read you a story in the New Testament that Jesus shares. There's a bunch of people around him, and he's talking about being a good neighbor. One of the Pharisees kind of cockily asks, well, who is my neighbor? And he reads this story. You know it well if you've been in church at all, but I want you to think about it from a perspective of being an encourager and running to the wounded. Luke chapter 10 and verse 30. Jesus replied to this man with a story. A Jewish man was traveling from Jerusalem down to Jericho, and he was attacked by bandits. They stripped him of his clothes, beat him up, left him half dead beside the road. By chance, a priest came along, the good ones. But when he saw the man lying there, crossed to the other side of the road and passed him by. A temple assistant, an usher in the church, walked over and looked at him lying there, but he also passed by on the other side. Then a despised Samaritan came along. When he saw the man, felt compassion for him. Going over to him, the Samaritan soothed his wounds with olive oil and wine and bandaged them. Then he put the man on his own donkey, and he took him to an inn where he took care of him. The next day, he handed the innkeeper 2 silver coins, telling him, take care of this man. If the bill runs higher than this, I'll pay you the next time I'm here. Then Jesus asks these men, now which of these 3 would you say was a neighbor to the man who was attacked by bandits? Jesus asked. The men replied, the one who showed him mercy. And Jesus said, now you go and do the same. Now you go and be the encourager. Hey, John, you want to come up and play? You go out and find somebody that needs encouragement. And let me just tell you, it might not be the one who looks wounded. There's a lot of people who look polished who are wounded. You may think they got a family that's put together and perfect, and it could be on the verge of falling apart. They could look like they've got all the money in the world, but they're in debt up to their eyeballs. And they need some kind of encouragement. And God will speak it to you because you'll just think it. Man, the way you treated your son encouraged me. The way you spoke to that parking attendant, that encouraged me. You're a good man. You're a good mom. I love how you interact with your kids. I love how you interact with your husband or your wife. People say that to Angie and I all the time, and man, it encourages us. They say nice things to us all the time, but you don't have to just say it to a pastor. You don't have to just say it to somebody you look at from some kind of you can say it to everybody around you. You can be an encourager. Finally, an encourager shows up. Just like this man did. He showed up and he attended the person who was wounded and he was there for them. Can you be an encourager? I want to take just a moment and encourage you today. And I want you to hear it in your heart. Not just what you would hear on a Sunday, but I want you to hear it on the inside and individually, like I'm at coffee with you, saying this to you like I believe it, because it's not me, it's the Holy Spirit speaking directly to your heart. I believe. I want you to know that you are enough. Jesus says you're enough. You've got what it takes to accomplish whatever it is you're trying to accomplish. You are enough. You are forgiven. Quit looking back in the past at your mistakes, your shortcomings, and your failures. God is saying, you're forgiven. And you're loved. If you've been here any amount of time, you've heard that 100,000 times. But I want to tell you deep down, God loves you wholeheartedly. Yeah, I did this last night. God loves you. And he's accepting of you. He loves you so much. This is what he sees in you. He sees that you are righteous. Man, I got to work really hard to be a righteous person. No, you already are righteous. Because when God sees you, he sees Jesus. Jesus lives in you. You are the righteousness of Christ. And finally, I want to encourage you today to say, you can do it. I don't know what it is you're facing. A job opportunity, an addiction, a worry, a doubt, a family situation, a sickness in your body. You can do it. Because of Jesus in you. Not because you're gifted or talented necessarily, but because of Jesus on the inside of you. Now this week, go and encourage somebody else. Would you pray with me?